We've heard quite a lot about club projects already this afternoon. Guildford District Rotary Club has had a very successful project, an overseas one, Arusha in Tanzania, school building, enhancing education. We're very lucky this afternoon, presentation just before break, to invite Peter Ricketts from the club to tell us about this Rotary project. Peter, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, fellow Rotarians and guests. When people generally think about Tanzania, they think about Kilimanjaro, with their sponsored climbs, the safari parks with their wild animals, a good shot of Serengeti, and the white sandy beaches. However, the true picture is very different. Life expectancy in Tanzania. Recently, there was a survey carried out, and it was 91st in a table of 96 leading countries. The average age is 63 compared with the UK of 83. Infants born, 1 in 10 will die by the age of 10. HIV, AIDS and malaria virtually wiped out a generation in Tanzania 20 odd years ago, which meant it has left 3 million orphans who roam the streets or live with their grandparents. Also, adult literacy is a shade over 70%. As a Rotary Club, we decided to help a poor Rotary Club. And after a thorough search, we discovered Faye Cran of the Arusha Rotary Club. We have since done several projects, always through Faye Cran, but with different Rotary clubs. We decided the greatest need was education. Our first project was educating 30 street children in Arusha over a 6-year period in secondary school at a cost of £1,000 a year. I'm very pleased to say that it was more than successful. Nima was the first street girl to graduate and go to university in Tanzania. Naomi followed 2 years later, and seen here with yours truly and Faye Cran, and enabled them to do jobs working for the community, one in a rehab centre, one working for prevention of HIV's, AIDS prevention. We then decided to build a school. It was called Tanzanian Tots. It was for children for between the ages of 5 and 9. Before the school was built, they had classes, but they couldn't be relied upon. The weather was extreme, very hot when they sat under the trees, or the rains, which are very heavy in Tanzania, meant that they didn't have continued schooling. The school was so popular and highly regarded, the Tanzanian Prime Minister opened it. Our next project, school, was a school in a Maasai area in the village of Nazareti. Move on. Everyone around the village lived in mud huts. Even the headmaster of the proposed school lived in a mud hut. We built 3 classrooms. And when Andrea, my wife, and I went to visit the school, we were treated like royalty. They entertained us for an hour and a half with singing and acting in Swahili, I would add, so we didn't really know what was going on. And it meant afterwards they presented me with a goat, gave me a slice, and I was extremely grateful when it's tradition to hand it over to the rest of the people there, because I could see being chewed a half an hour later. At the same meeting, I was very honoured to receive a Maasai elder. They presented me with a staff. They also presented me with a cloak, but unfortunately I've been banned from wearing it today, which you can see a picture on the international stand. I returned to the school 3 years later and found that World Vision had built a further 3 classrooms. So it had become the major school, one of the major schools in Arusha area. We then built a school for market ladies. The ladies' market was situated on the main road into Arusha. It was dirty and dusty, and at least 1 or 2 children, market traders, were killed each year. We built the school because somebody donated a plot of land. We supplied the desks, which doubled up as a market stall, and they were taught. None of these ladies had been to school. They were taught English, cookery, health, HIV/AIDS prevention, water sanitation, and cookery. We then answered the call for a 6th form college. There was a great shortage of them in Tanzania, so we embarked on building one. We decided to involve the local community, who had fundraising events and also worked free of charge. It enabled us to build a fantastic school of 6 classrooms, a library, an auditorium, a sports hall, kitchens, a restaurant, and also accommodation for the kids that came from further afield than Arusha. At this time, we applied for a matching grant, which was successful, I'm pleased to say, for 3,000 dictionaries. 2 of each dictionary was distributed to each library in all the secondary schools in Tanzania and were distributed by various Rotary clubs. The Guildford Inner Wheel have knitted hundreds of garments for the children in Tanzania. 3 years ago, I visited a babies' hospital and presented loads of babies with loads of garments, and you can see that conditions are extremely cramped. 3 years later, I returned to an orphanage, and again we went through the same procedures, and everybody was so happy. 3 years ago, while staying with Faye, she was asked to do a tour for some cameramen around the streets at night. She asked me to go along, and it was the most scary, horrific experience that I've ever had. The kids were fighting with knives, pilfery, and drugs galore. They felt let down by society. I was lucky enough to meet 2 guys who work on the streets, Boniface and Canai, and they were desperate to set something up to take them off the streets. After long discussions with Faye, we agreed that we would set up groups with a trainer and 8 trainees, and the first one we set up was at a rehab centre where we donated the 2 buildings rent-free. We supplied the tools, and it meant that within 1 year they would be self-sufficient. They started work in the morning at 8 o'clock, learning. They'd have a rest at 1 o'clock because it got extremely hot, and it meant that in the evenings they were able to produce goods for sale to make them self-sufficient. The next project, again, we were lucky enough to be donated a large building, and that consisted of motor mechanics and motor panel beaking. Same principle. And these tools, incidentally, were purchased. They were purchased locally, but the majority were supplied by TWAM, Tools with a Mission. And they even delivered them to Arusha for us because they have their own projects in Africa. And if anybody is interested in supplying tools abroad, then they are an extremely helpful organisation. In response to what they did for us, we did have a big tool collection which was collected from us and taken for repair, for distribution to the poorer countries. We then set up hairdressers. This consisted of 2 trainers and 5 trainees, and they were self-sufficient virtually immediately. All we had to find was rent for 1 year and the trainers' wages for a few months. The next group we helped with the albino. The albino is born with less pigments than the normal person, and there's many more in Tanzania than anywhere else. They are subject to skin cancer and also blindness, and they're very lucky to reach the age of 35. They are also very persecuted. The witch doctors tell the natives that arms and legs bring you health and wealth. There are many horrific stories that I could tell you, but probably the worst is a young teenage girl was found murdered. She had both arms and legs amputated. And 2 days later, her father was arrested with 2 other men and were later convicted. We set up a centre for them, 12 plus a trainer. We had to have high walls to protect them, and they worked very hard, and really they had a terrific marketing system. They were selling their goods as fast as they could make them. When we went over there, we found that they had no stock because they'd sold it all to Nairobi the week before, and I've just heard that they've got an export order for Canada worth several $1,000s. When they're trained, it's different. They can't set up other centres. So what they do is we give them a small Singer sewing machine. They go back to the safety of their village and produce from there. And every fortnight, somebody from the centre goes there, collect the goods that they've made, and then pay her, and then give her more fabrics to work on in the next 2 weeks. In the future, we are trying to set up, well, the next planned set up is 37 street ladies being taken off the streets, put in a nice centre, and produce goods in needlework and dressmaking. We've also got a group of 4 barbers who will be trained, and also a group of 20 to grind maize. Now, I'm going over in November, and I'll be able to find out what that consists of. While I was there, I visited a shoe factory, and it really was quite an eye-opener. Health and safety would have had a field day. There were 12 ladies doing handwork on a table in a room 14-foot square. These 2 guys had set up the business a little while ago, buying shoes from China importing and selling. They made such a success of it they could afford to set up a factory. But, as you can see, it's all handwork. And they were in desperate need of a sewing machine, an industrial sewing machine. We lent them the money, and they pay the money back by direct debit every month. And they've assured me that by the end of the year, the 12 would have doubled to 24. As a result of all these activities, we have taken probably 70 or 80 kids off the street. And it means that their self-respect, dignity, and pride has been restored. It should enable them to have normal families and bring the kids up in a different environment to what they experienced. Currently, we have a global project application going through, which I understand should be successful, for the first rehab centre in East Africa being set up in Zanzibar. All this would not have been possible without our Rotary Club of Guildford District's charity boxing evening, which has been running for 38 years and is run by all the members. All the members get involved. To date, we've raised £750,000, and each year we contribute £3,000 to £5,000 to Arusha, and it means that up until now we're approaching £60,000. If any of the Rotary clubs here do not have a Rotary International project and would be interested in helping us, we would welcome you with open arms. We would guarantee that you would know where your money was going, and hopefully you would be regularly updated. There is a stand outside for District International, and all my details are on there. And if you'd like me to come and talk to your club, I will only be very pleased to do so. That is my talk. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Don Raffin for not only flicking the pictures today, but he's been a great help in constructing the talk. Thank you very much.